This episode of the Sloopcast brought to you by the Mad Canadian Barbecue Company. We are recording this on Father's Day. Now, you're probably listening to it the day after Father's Day. And if that's news to you, and you found out you just messed up, maybe buy Dad some spices from the Mad Canadian Barbecue Company. What's he like? Is he a coffee guy? Is he a steak guy? I would like to recommend the Coffee and Q. It's fantastic on beef. It has coffee in it, but it's also like an amazing barbecue rub. Again, if he's a steak guy, a beef guy, then I cannot recommend the Kerry steak anymore. I know it's Kyle's favorite. That and so much more can be found at madcanadianbbq.com. That's the madcanadianbbq.com. Use Sloopcast10 to get 10% off your entire order. The Mad Canadian Barbecue Company, they've got your butts covered. This episode of the Sloopcast also brought to you by Wolf's Ridge Brewing. Once again, did you mess up? If your dad lives in one of the major markets in Ohio, you can actually get beer delivered straight to his door. They do deliveries in the Columbus area Tuesday through Sunday, but outside of Columbus, Cincinnati on Sunday, Cleveland on Monday, Dayton on Wednesday, Akron, Canton, Findlay, Toledo on Thursday. Send Dad some beer. That's all. You know Dad wants beer. Dad likes steak. Dad likes beer. These are universal truths. Send Dad some beer. And at Wolf's Ridge Brewing, they have an amazing selection. Their selection keeps growing. They have their staples, the Daybreak, which is a coffee vanilla cream ale, the Pack IPA, which is an American IPA, and the Heartlandia, which is an American lager. If Dad's like a Bud Light drinker, but you maybe want to take his game up a tad, I highly recommend the Heartlandia, which is a great intro beer for someone who doesn't necessarily drink craft all that much. Again, this, so much more can be found at wolfsridgebrewing.com. That's wolfsridgebrewing.com.
Get me home before I lose my mind. I need some space to let my tape rewind. Oh, whoa, 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 oh,
We've got barbecue back here. You're all invited. Welcome to the Sloopcast. How are you doing today, Tony?
Doing pretty good. Thanks for having me on again. Every 4 months or so, we get to do this, and I enjoy it.
Yeah, every once in a while. Kyle has one of those lives where he takes trips and does things with people.
I don't need that.
This is my version of that because I'm a sad human being.
I'm so sorry to be here for you.
Yeah, well, we had you back on in, I want to say, February for Grilling Gerdeman, I believe I named that episode. What's changed? In the world, with you, anything new?
I think maybe, based on what has happened, I should never be on this show.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, if causation equals correlation,
Almost.
then everything that has gone wrong in the world is your fault.
Or yours. I mean, you did invite me.
50-50.
Kyle's. He left.
Oh. Yeah, it's Kyle's fault. Yeah,
That's right.
it's Kyle's fault. But also some changes for you, professionally speaking. Also
definitely.
for us, but, you know, mostly for you.
Yeah, here at BuckeyeScoop.com now, it's... I mean, you know, there's a ton of people here now. There's a ton of potential, a bunch of ideas. And the great thing about having good people and good ideas is that you actually have the ability to actualize them and make them happen. And, you know, this is our third week now. You know, we're still getting things fixed, getting things better. You know, the early days of a website are never easy. But the great thing is people have been very patient and happy to be part of the community. And really that's the most important thing about it, is that it is a community, and we want to keep people happy, but also just have a friendly place for Buckeye fans to talk, amazingly, Ohio State sports.
Right? One of my absolute favorite things about the message board is, one, I don't want to say it's small, because it's not small by any means. There's lots of people on there. But anyone who has spent any amount of time on Reddit know that, like, the really big boards turn into a mess, and the medium to small ones are typically great communities. And it's absolutely in that great, like, I know I've seen some people say, oh, we're a bit surprised about the price over at Buckeye Scoop. But one, you shouldn't be. I think it's a perfectly fair, awesome price. And two, it helps. Like, you don't want what's to stop, if you're like some of the other websites and you're like, sign up, which, by the way, Buckeye Scoop says they will never ever do, sign up for 3 months for $1. Then you get like rival fans in there coming in trolling and doing all sorts of dumb stuff. This makes sure that, the price point makes sure that it's Buckeye fans. And I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, and it's what, $12.99 a month if you do it the monthly plan. Universally, other services have been $9.99 since forever.
Yeah.
So maybe after 10 or 15 years, a little bit of a price hike is okay.
Yeah.
Compared to what has been out there. But it also, you mentioned the deals, and it's not fair to the people who are paying full price to then, 1 month later have somebody come in behind them and get to come in for, almost no money. So we want to make it, a place where people are all equal in terms of what they're putting into it and also what they're getting out of it. And you mentioned it is, even though it's new, it's a close knit community, and I'm excited about it because it's just a friendly place right now. And the internet, that can be hard to find.
Yeah, and the boards have like a no politics policy.
Yeah,
and that's fantastic. I know I almost started a thread just because of like the insurrection that was happening at Oklahoma State, and that's like a legitimate football story.
Mm-hmm.
But then as I was starting, I was like, nah, because while what I was saying was legitimate football news, I just was able to envision 2 or 3 pages later what it was about to turn into. And I'm like, I'm not going to do it. I think someone else eventually did it later, and I didn't necessarily follow the thread, but I know I saw one post which sort of started to devolve, and then it was gone. Mm-hmm. Someone was on top of it. It started to get there, and then it was gone. And
that's the other good thing.
It's great that you guys are doing a great job moderating that board.
Yeah, and we have a bunch of people right now that are moderating, and we haven't even reached out to moderators yet. It's just the 9 of us attached to it right now who are doing that before we reach out to people like you to spend 6 to 8 hours a day. Just
I'm doing that
policing.
Right now. I'm already doing that. We don't want to talk about Tom's podcast at all, right? Screw him.
You've already talked about it now, so you may as well just continue on with his morning scoop daily show on the Buckeye Scoop. It's 15 minutes in the morning of whomever. Eventually he'll have you on, and he'll put your name on it. So that, it's cool. You've got something in the morning, and generally every day something in the afternoon as well in terms of podcasts. Yeah,
it's a great one-stop shop. I think is maybe by my observation what you guys are going for, and I think you guys are doing great. Honestly, I've had some people say stuff to me like, "Oh, I love the website," and I'm just immediately like, "No, I'm just lucky enough that I send an email to Tony and Tony posts it for me. I'm a fan of this website more than I am a member of this. I'm more on your side of it, on the fan side of it, as opposed to the Tony side of it. And honestly, that's how Kyle and I'll moderate the board if you want me to moderate the board. That's great. But for the most part, one of the things that Kyle and I have always tried to do with the Sloopcast is to not cross the line from fan to profession. Like, we want to sort of maintain our fanaticism and not make it a full-time job, and always try and do the podcast from that perspective. So I have people say stuff to me about how much they like the website all the time, and I'm just immediately deflect. I have nothing to do with it.
But that's why I like you guys. You know, I've tried to keep you near me for a while now, is because that is the perspective that you can't necessarily have with a credentialed site.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to come from the angles of the beat, or, you know, Mark and Bill doing their recruiting thing, or the gambling thing, or Kirk doing his thing, you know, talking to people like Orlando Pace and Jim Tressel and Urban
If you guys
Meyer.
aren't listening to Barton's podcast, you're missing out. Start that right now.
He's got more coming, and he showed me a text of the next guy here in the next couple of weeks that hasn't given an interview in a very long time. So that's something to look forward to. But then, you know, you guys I like because it's fans listening to themselves, but more eloquently.
Wait till we have to pronounce some names later before you call me eloquent. All right, let's talk football. One of the biggest things to come out of this week is the announcement of a home and home with Alabama, which is enormous. If we're talking like the most storied program, I'm hesitating because I don't want to say it, but maybe the most storied program in college football in Alabama. I mean, Bear Bryant, then some other stuff happened, and then Nick Saban. There's a lot of national titles there. They're on the short list. Other names I don't want to mention as far as historic prominence. But yeah, it's huge. It's absolutely enormous. Now, it does not happen until 2027 and 2028. So I think the first question I want to ask you is likelihood this actually happens.
I think the likelihood here is better than it was with Tennessee and Georgia when Ohio State had those two series scheduled, because things popped up that eliminated those, and the penalties here are pretty, strict if they don't happen.
$6 million penalty?
Well, I think it was. Is it $3 million per school? It's significant.
Yeah,
and not worth paying, especially when you bring in like $7 million for the home game that would entail. But when you've got these two schools, they both want this to happen. Now, Nick Saban, I think we both assume will be long gone for this game because, he doesn't like road games. I think, you go back to Penn State and maybe 2009, 2010 when they had a home and home was like the last time Alabama had a significant home and home. Which,
by the way, Saban probably had no part in scheduling.
Exactly. And so he's done all of these neutral site games, an hour away from wherever, he calls home. And so now I think you'll have an 18 playoff by then. So a loss is even less impactful. A single loss is even less impactful than it is now. This is what Ohio State does. That's what they've done for, 2 decades now. So I can't wait. Hopefully I'm still covering and hopefully it happens. Who will be coaching Alabama when this game happens? Is it Dabo?
That joke was so, I think I made that joke right away thinking I was clever. And then 5 minutes later, Dabo Swinney was trending nationally on Twitter because so many people were making that joke. But yeah.
Lane Kiffin?
That would be amazing. I pray it's Lane Kiffin. I think the question is how good will it's only 7 years, but Bama was not great before Saban got there. There were a lot of sanctions, and they were a heavily sanctioned program in the 90s. They were not very good in the 90s, aside from 91 or 92. It was not a great program. And then, you make this now and you want it to be a pair of titans, but who knows? 7 years is enormous.
I wonder what happens with the new coach trying to keep up with what Nick Saban did. Do they stay on the up and up, assuming everything's on the up and up now, of course, which of course it is, obviously.
Yeah, yes, of course. Until they're caught.
But if if there is even more of a desire to or a need to maybe bend the rules to just keep up with what Nick Saban did, because the expectations when you take over for him, obviously you never want to take over for a legend, but somebody has to.
Ryan Day right now,
and you're being given keys to a really nice car, and so you'll have to do your best to keep up with the pace that Nick Saban set. Good luck. I think maybe it would be best for that person if Nick Saban is kind of on the decline right now and Alabama maybe loses a couple games a year, so that when they take over, 10 wins is good enough, because that's what Nick Saban did his last 3 years or whatever.
Yeah.
That's not going to be good enough for fans in terms of, we eventually won our national title. And it's just crazy. Just the lack of home run coaches they had lined up before Nick Saban. When you talk about Mike Price and, Rich Rodriguez, I think Dennis Franchione for a spell, and all of these different people who were actually would commit to the job and then say, no, I don't want it. And you're right. Alabama after Gene Stallings was nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And,
and that was a dirty program when he was there.
So
I mean, even by SEC standards.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't see them being Alabama after Nick Saban leaves. What are they? Can they be Auburn? Probably.
Yeah.
And that's that's what the peak is. LSU.
Yeah.
Because what do you expect from LSU this year?
No. I mean, they'll be fine. That last year was Joe Burrow. In the same way that we saw Auburn look like an amazing program, and then Cam Newton left. It happens. I'm an offensive line guy. I will talk to you all day about offensive lines. The dirty thing that us football nerds don't like to admit, but it's a quarterback's game. And on this side of the century, it is a quarterback's game, period. I mean, look at Louisville. Louisville looked like maybe they were a program on the rise. And then Jackson leaves, and all of a sudden, they won 2 years later. They had a 1-win season or something crazy like that.
Yeah, and with Lamar Jackson, they're one play away from beating Clemson, and then to imagine them being the same program the next year after that. No, you get the right quarterback, and anything can happen as long as they also have the right offensive coordinator putting that dude in a position, and that's what they had with Joe Bradley as the passing game coordinator with LSU.
Yeah, I think early on, I wish I could remember who it was, but basically it was LSU got a quarterback, but it was in the Happy Gilmore, Happy learned how to putt. It's whenever LSU has a quarterback, look out. It's few and far between, but when it happens, because their defense is always what LSU's defense is, but when they get a quarterback, look out. But it just doesn't happen very often. All right, conspiracy theory for you. The 8-game playoff starts in the year 2025.
Is that the first year of the next TV contract?
Not sure about that, but this is where I'm coming at.
All right.
In the year 2025, Ohio State will play both Washington and Texas. Previous to that, it's Oregon. They play Oregon and Oregon. Next 2 years, they play Notre Dame and Notre Dame. The next year, they play Washington. But starting in 2025, they double up on marquee names. Now, that's in the past, you just sort of say, well, they'll end up moving one of those, which still might be true, but not for my conspiracy theory. Because starting in 2025, Alabama starts doubling up and playing 2 marquee games a year. Double coincidence or tinfoil hat time?
Well, I don't think you can have a double coincidence with programs like Alabama and Ohio State. They're there for a reason. But also, I've also been expecting that 2025 schedule to one of those teams to move. I think there's a spot in maybe 2029 that is still open.
Yeah. We'll just schedule Cincinnati. It'll be fine.
But you're right. I mean, they have had to move other games where there's been doubled up. But, I wonder if we look around the nation, how many other, are there other instances of this?
Yeah.
And then I don't think that becomes a conspiracy theory anymore. I think that's just a theory.
So you're saying I need to continue to do research?
I don't want to tell you what to do. And as a conspiracy theorist, this is your job.
Okay.
You can't just stop at two.
As a conspiracy theory, it is my job to cherry pick data that fits the narrative I want to tell. Right,
but you still have to go look for the data, and then just pick which data you like.
Okay.
And you see these doubling up. It goes back to what, like this, the schedules the way they were like 30 years ago in the 80s, and in the 70s and 60s, there'd be no qualms about playing Notre Dame and Oregon or Notre Dame and Washington in the same year. That's what you did. Because the goal then was to win your conference and go to the Rose Bowl or go to the Orange Bowl or whatever bowl you had. So it's been interesting to see the way the BCS changed everything, and then the playoffs. I've been long hoping that this move to 8 teams would bring those kinds of games back, because you can't afford a loss, and it is good for the sport. And that's what the players want. The players don't want to play Florida A&M. They don't want to play Bowling Green. They love the big games. And at some point, we always talk about it, doing all of this stuff for the players, and the players are treated very well. But why not also treat them well with big games?
I think one of my least favorite narratives is the 8-team playoff would ruin college football, because a lot of people, and I have to say, I kind of get it, they kind of like the fact that every game is urgent, that one game could ruin your schedule or your season, and that's it. And I get that, because all of a sudden you're switching over to watch Clemson face Pitt, which isn't a game you planned on watching, but you hurry up and switch over anyway because potential chaos is about to. I get that. I do like that, but the cost of that is that then no one wants to lose, and you have what Ohio State's schedule was last year, which was garbage.
Yeah, but the argument about every game mattering is true until a team loses, and then none of the games after that game matter.
Exactly.
So this, I think, with an 8 team, or if you do the 5 conference champions make it, and then 3 at large teams,
you'd have to reserve a spot for some sort of group or 5 provision.
Yeah, I completely agree. If they're in the top 15 or whatever,
sued otherwise. It becomes a federal trade commission issue if you exclude them.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any reason to exclude them, because you're going to give them the 8 seed, you're going to send them to the number 1 seed's campus, and then you can punish them for making the playoffs. This is what you get. This
Take
is
that, Memphis.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's inevitable, and I'm looking forward to it. It's good. It'll be good for everyone, and games will matter longer, and it becomes each conference championship. It essentially becomes a playoff game, which I think is awesome as well. And it gives hope to everybody. It gives hope to a 2-loss Minnesota team. College football will be crazy once you have so many teams that have the potential to make the playoffs and then do something with it.
Yeah, I think we were in a situation last year where everyone's like, what happens if Clemson loses the ACC title game? And I'm sitting here, they'll still get in. Mm-hmm. So you want to talk about every game mattering? Guess what? When the title games don't matter, even if Clemson had lost the ACC, they'd have gone to the playoff. Does every game matter?
And that might still happen with the 8 team, but at least that game, the conference championship game matters. Up. Exactly.
Because now, instead of being the number 1 seed, they're the number 6 or 5 or however, or 7, whatever seed. And now they have to play a much tougher opponent.
Plus, I want to see playoff games on campus, at least the first round. And that would be amazing. Clemson at Ohio State, December 12th or whatever.
Yeah, it would be great. I want to see one of the Southern schools come up and play in the shoe in December. Just that's all I want in the world.
It'll be one of those December days that's 68 degrees and it's perfect, and we won't. It'll be one of those anomalies, and Clemson will walk out with like a 48-14 win and be like, we don't know what all the fuss is about. Ohio in December. What's that? Who cares? It was nothing.
Right. Conspiracy theory number 2 for you.
Right.
Nick Saban retires at the end of the 2021 season.
Oh yeah, that's when the road games start. So
2022 is when the road games start.
So yeah, that was
actually, I'm not
months
sure.
ago.
Now that you say it like that, they start the home and home with Texas in 2022. I'm actually not sure which one is played where.
I think it was that game where that series, that once it was announced that it was home and home, it's like, well, that tells you exactly when Nick Saban will be retiring.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it'll be, is the home game first for Alabama? Maybe he sticks around for that, and that's his swan song season.
Yeah,
and then he's
I'd have to.
I am not going to Texas.
No, definitely not Wisconsin. He's not going to go play in Wisconsin, which is their home and home after Texas.
Remember, this is a guy that couldn't win in the Big Ten, so there's no way he's traveling to the Big Ten.
See, you say that, and then like the Michigan State upset immediately comes to mind. Now I'm sad.
I was just thinking about where I was sitting in the horseshoe, and where I remained sitting for many minutes after the game.
Part of you is still sitting there, Tony.
I left a hat on a hydrant. Walking back to my apartment, I wanted nothing that was with me at that game. I wanted nothing to do with, and
burn all the clothing.
And you can't go back home and like watch college football, or because we would like record everything and then go back and watch it and then go out afterwards. And it's like, yeah, I think that tape probably went in the garbage immediately. Didn't even record over it.
All right, next topic. We have reports out of Texas, LSU, Alabama, Clemson, of a high number of players testing positive for COVID-19. Now, correct me if I am wrong, Ohio State tested, but are not releasing results.
That is correct. Well, they did test. They have no plans when we talked to them on arrival day. They had no plans to release anything. However, if teams continue to release information, they may, I'm thinking they may change their mind. As of right now, I've been told of no positive tests, which is obviously great, but it will be interesting to see if they do acknowledge some positives here moving forward. Now, Ryan Day doesn't like to talk about injuries,
right? Doesn't
like to talk about how long somebody's going to be out and this and that. And so if somebody shows up on the availability list during the season for being out of the game, we'll have to see if they're in the stadium when they get you. If the games are played, we'll have to see if they are, they're in sweats or whatever. And if they're not there, then you immediately think, oh, there's a positive test. And if so, then that person is not out, is going to be out the next week as well. And you're going to be looking, where is Justin Fields? Every single Saturday, you got to find Justin Fields.
And I think it makes sense from a HIPAA standpoint, because like you can't then say, this is not a sprained ankle. You can't report on this the same way that they would report on a sprained ankle. This is actual like medical information, and you can't just release it. And then if you say 10 players, let's just make up a number, 10 players from Ohio State, again, totally made up, then what happens? I'm not saying necessarily you would do this, but someone would then, like you guys did when they first reported to the WAC, someone would be there counting who's there, who's not there, and then by subtraction be able to tell you who those players potentially were that tested positive. Potentially, not technically a HIPAA violation, but it's still an invasion of medical privacy.
And it's also an assumption that, that may or may not be true. It could be completely false. A player could just be at class. A player could already have gotten to the building and is getting treatment for just regular old, hamstring or whatever. And so it's like when we were there on check-in day, counting and like, who did we not see and who has yet to show up. And there, we were waiting for certain players, and we talked to Jerry Emig, the SID, and he's like, well, some players got in later and have now taken their test, but we're still waiting for results. There's so many different factors when you're looking for players. Why aren't they there? And it's class, it's family. Oh, he had a family emergency. imagine reporting that these guys weren't showing and they may be COVID, but instead it's like, well, he was actually had a family emergency, his aunt died or something like that.
Right.
And now
that's why I preface that by saying I'm not saying you would do that, but someone potentially would. So do these high number of tests, does it concern you at all? Because we were feeling real optimistic about the games are going to happen. The games are going to happen on schedule. You know, maybe we weren't necessarily feeling great about the number of people in attendance, but we were all feeling real good for a while that the college football season was going to happen as scheduled. 28 players out of Clemson. I know Texas had a huge number, although I don't remember what it is off the top of my head. Is it starting to put any of that into doubt?
I think anytime you have numbers that alarm people, it's concerning in terms of how people will react to it. Because if we're talking about 10 players who are positive, but nobody goes to the hospital,
right,
and nobody even knows they have it, and maybe one person is coughing, is that really? Are we really going to shut things down if nobody is sick enough to be hospitalized? And then what if only one person is hospitalized? Is that really enough to shut things down? But then it's like, well, all of these guys can spread it. And I don't think playing football eliminates that spread, because without football, they're just going to be doing normal things. And I mean, you see how things are in Ohio right now. People are back to doing things, and they're back in restaurants, they're back in bars, they're at the parks, they're at the zoo. You're not going to be able to keep players from being college kids, being young people, and young people are doing a lot of just socializing.
Yeah.
And so I don't think you save them or keep them safer by eliminating football. I think by having football, there's more tests, more checking. That may sound callous to some. I get concerned that there will be so much worry just because of the numbers that you start to shut things down, even though there are protocols in place for every single positive test. And if you're a school and you don't have those protocols in place, then yeah, you should lose your season.
Yeah, and we all know that some states have been more strict about this than other states, and maybe that's part of the reason why a lot of the schools that have come back with large numbers are located in states that have not been as strict.
Yeah, and then you get into the states issues and.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to get into the politics of it by any means.
No, but just like every state has their own thing, and that's why the NCAA and some of the coaches and everybody wanted a universal set of rules for return and for playing. And there's some schools now are suspending the voluntary workouts. I know Bowling Green doesn't even start until tomorrow, and Ohio State has been, they've got a 2-week head start on them. So all of these different schools
now Bowling Green doesn't stand a chance.
That's you have to wonder. The good thing with all of this is that schools have been allowed to start this early, so that by the time it is ready for camps, players should be good to go. But what happens if states come in and just start? No more places of gatherings of 10 are no longer allowed. Workouts are gyms are no longer allowed, just because numbers are spiking as tests get, there are more tests out there. And I don't want to get into the whole politics of it. And, and it's sad that this is a political thing, you know?
Yeah. But there's a lot of that going around.
But I wonder, like, if the hospitalizations of players isn't happening, how much of a concern is it for them? And I know they want to play. Yeah. And so you have people like arguing for players to be safe, and they couch it as players' rights. That's fine. But if you're not also taking in their desire to play and their right to play, then you are trying to hold them back, just as others are maybe trying to push them forward. And now you've got another entirely set of different issues.
The players are, as almost always happens, the players are pawns in the narrative that people already want to tell. Because, if I'm going to make a political statement today, let it be that, which is that, like when I was joking about my conspiracy theory earlier, you go out and you cherry pick the stuff and you make it fit the thing you want to make it fit.
As I just did.
And the players do exactly because they don't have a union, because they don't have any sort of central thing for them to speak out, that people just apply what they want onto them. And anyway, we're getting too close into the political part of it, I think.
Well, and let me just one more thing with because we talked to Josh Myers and Wyatt Davis back in April. These are two guys who came back because they wanted this year because their fourth year, junior year, they wanted to showcase themselves for the NFL. These two guys want more than anything to be on the field. And Josh Myers said, I'll sign any waiver you want me to sign, because this year is very, very important for them. And there's a lot of guys like that where, remember, this is what they want to do with their profession. And to say, no, it's too dangerous. This is also football. I mean, where have the concerns been? And granted, there have been, but not enough to, hey, let's shut the game down because of concussions.
Well, and it's also worth noting that these players aren't, from a selfish standpoint, aren't at risk. This is a respiratory disease. These guys have the best respiratory systems, top 1% in the world. The disease does not affect young people who otherwise have a healthy respiratory and immune system the same way that these guys aren't in danger. These guys are fine. Now, there is, of course, the larger issue of them being infected and spreading it to others who are at risk, and I don't want to diminish that, but I think that's why you see the NBA and the NHL and some of the other places moving to this quote-unquote bubble system. LeBron James is going to be fine even if he catches it, because he's healthy, because he's one of the healthiest people on the planet. But there is still the risk of spreading it elsewhere, so that's a thing you have to be cognizant of. All right. Ad break. We're going to do an ad break. Tony, you are a proud High Life drinker. Can I persuade you? Can I maybe move you towards a little bit of craft? Because
I have no issues with that.
Wolf's Ridge has a great lineup of beers that are not like super challenging double IPAs. I know in the first ad break, I brought up the Heartlandia. It's an all-American lager. It is grown with Ohio barley, Ohio hops. It is completely sourced within the state of Ohio. Is basically an easy drinking lager. They also have the 6 Feet, which is an American wheat beer. Again, very easy drinking. The Daybreak, which is a coffee vanilla cream ale. That's another one. You're going to get a bit of coffee in there. Get a little bit of upper with your downer, because who doesn't love that? And again, if you're talking about keeping things within Ohio, it's actually made with One Line Coffee, which, if you don't know, is an Ohio roaster. Keeping things in Ohio, Wolf's Ridge Brewing. They are still open from a restaurant perspective. They're still not taking people in. Again, an amazing selection of beer. They're canning more beer than they've ever canned before. They're delivering to more markets than they've ever delivered before. Wolf's Ridge Brew, they just came out with their summer selection, which there's a citrus American IPA, which is amazing. The Leisurely is back. It's a raspberry ale. I believe it's an ale. It's amazing. Wolf's Ridge Brewing is a great brewery to get into if you are just sort of stepping into craft. They put the IBU right on the can, which is the higher the number, the more bitter it is. The lower the number, a little bit more easy drinking it is. They put that right front and center on the can. They tell you what the flavors are right on the front of the can. If you're just getting into craft, I think Wolf's Ridge both has you covered on that end. And if you're a complete craft nerd, they also still have stuff on the back end, which will make you happy as someone who loves a good challenging beer. So check out all of that at wolfsridgebrewing.com. That's wolfsridgebrewing.com. And then there's the Mad Canadian Barbecue Company. Mad Canadian Barbecue Company is still holding things down. And I'm told today, I checked the website, it wasn't there yet, but I have it on good authority from the Mad Canadian himself that today, 2 new spices are being released. One of them is the Mad Hatter. It is a finishing salt. It is salt, but it's also spicy, not like black pepper, but chili pepper salt. It also has lime in there, so you get that great chili lime combination that I know so many people love. It's salt, it's chili, it's lime. Where could you go wrong? It's amazing. And then also the Old Fashioned, which is essentially a spice mixture inspired by the bourbon, the whiskey cocktail, the Old Fashioned. It tastes like bourbon. It tastes like cherry. It has a little bit of sugar in there, just like the Old Fashioned does. He says it's for ribs. I think it is far more versatile than that personally. You can get 10% off your entire order using Sloopcast10. That's Sloopcast10 at checkout. The Mad Canadian Barbecue Company, they have your butts covered. Did I sell you on any of those, Tony?
You sold me on all of it, and the intro ad with the Heartlandia especially. So, yeah, you know me well, and
sorry to use you as a pawn in the ad.
No, that's what I'm here for. That's actually what I am here for.
just as a pawn. All right, let's talk a little bit of recruiting. Tristan Leigh, who is a name that we have not talked a lot about because he did not seem like a guy that was coming to Ohio State. I think we actually first mentioned his name just on last week's episode when we were talking about, well, if Latham's not coming to Ohio State, and that looks like the case, where does Ohio State go next? And we sort of included Leigh in a list of players that, man, you'd really hope for, but didn't seem all that realistic. Well, looks like Ohio State's making up for some lost time.
It's interesting. It reminds me of 2018 when Nicholas Petit-Frere pretty much came out of nowhere after Ohio State lost out on Jackson Carman. And so you Buckeye fans were disappointed. Ohio State coaches were disappointed. And then, I guess let's just go out and get somebody who's rated higher. And that's what they did with Petit-Frere. Now, Jackson Carman is playing and starting, and this is the year for Nicholas Petit-Frere. But it wouldn't be, I guess, out of the realm for Ohio State to miss out on a guy who they thought they had and then go get somebody who is also really, really good. Urban Meyer was known for that. When he would have decommitments, he'd go and get somebody who was even ranked higher than that. Ryan Day has shown he's not bad at recruiting, and so this feels like, would you be shocked right now if they ended up getting a commitment from him?
No, I would not. Had you asked me last week, I think I even said something along the lines of what you just said, where I don't see, and I mentioned him with 3 or 4 other offensive tackle names, where I said, I don't expect Ohio State to sign any of these guys. And then I immediately said after that, but I also wouldn't have predicted NPF joining Ohio State in the wake of missing on Jackson Carman.
Yeah. And the other thing is, they're pretty much set on who they have and who they're going to get. So they can, as Urban Meyer used to say, laser focus on their last remaining guys. And if he's their last offensive lineman, they're going to spend a lot of time, all hands on deck. And it's going to be Ryan Day. It's going to be Greg Studrawa. It'll be, Brian Hartline, Al Washington, whomever, all of them.
All 11.
Like as Gary Oldman said in The Professional, everyone, and just all hands on deck and make it happen, because they need another tackle in this class after, I think because of the 2020 class, there's some guys who were maybe reaches. We'll see if they really are reaches, but if you've got a shot and you miss out on a guy that you thought you had in J.C. Latham, who they'll still try to get to visit Ohio State. This would not be a bad fallback to land a different 5-star guy.
Oh, darn. Gonna have to settle for a different 5-star guy. Yeah, I think one of the things, and I will want to say I heard this on Gives and Banks this week, plug for another Scoop podcast, where I think they said that Tristan Leigh is maybe even a bit further along from a technical standpoint right now than Latham, although that Latham maybe had more in the way of physical gifts and a little bit more potential. But they said that the difference between them essentially is not huge. That, it's that they're, different strengths, different weaknesses between them, but largely pretty even.
Yeah, and they really were, they were focused on Latham, and the fact that Tristan Leigh is still interested while also probably being not getting the type of attention that he will now, I think bodes well. We'll see. Ohio State thought they had Latham and they didn't, and they may get to the point where they think they have Leigh and they don't, but they do. They've done some good things in that Virginia area of landing guys, and Pryor and Henderson is from there as well. So there's a history there, and there's also a need. And I know I believe Alabama talked to J.C. Latham about Paris Johnson. How do you're not going to play behind or play in front of Paris Johnson, but there's four other places to play on the offensive line, and you can start out at guard and move to tackle, or there's a right tackle. There's so many different. You get hung up on one player on an offensive line who may be the difference in you deciding on that school. If that's actually really what happened is, there's so many other places to play, including left tackle, because Paris Johnson is not starting there yet.
Right. And from Alex Geitman over at the Buckeye Scoop, he said in regards to Leigh that he had it as no chance as recently as a few weeks ago, but that it is now possible. So possible isn't, it's if we applied a mathematical number to that, it would probably be like 25%, but 25% is a lot when you started at 0 just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. And the trajectory from nowhere to somewhere.
Yeah, it's straight up. And he also said that he'll have a lot more on that on this week's edition of the A-Deck for all of you who are Scoop subscribers. A couple other quick recruiting hits. Jaylin Davies goes to Oregon, which is not a huge surprise. I think he may have, and I'm speculating on this, been a little bit spurned by the fact that Ohio State said, we want you to visit before you're allowed to commit. And then Burke, who is from Arizona, who, is basically also really far away from Ohio State, was allowed to commit without visiting. And Jaylin Davies, I think at that point, I don't want to say I think there's still so it's not like he moved on from Ohio State at that point. I don't necessarily think that recruitment is dead, but this is such a weird recruiting cycle with so many players committed right now, which compared to last year's class last year, the number is astronomical. And I think a lot of players are concerned that there aren't going to be spots left, which leads to a lot of what I'm going to start calling panic committing. And everyone who follows recruiting knows that there's like an epic wave of decommitments coming in September or October when visits start happening again. So Jaylin Davies, I think the door is still open.
Having lunch with Mark Givler and Kirk Barton this weekend, we were talking about how you start a website that is heavily based in recruiting when the entire recruiting class is pretty much done. But as you said, once those visits start up, there's going to be some fun, crazy stuff going on. And then they're going to be Mark Givler, Mick Walker, Bill Green, Alex Gleitman. Those guys are going to be running around, talking to everybody, trying to figure out what fires are real and what smoke is fake. And it's going to be a real good time.
Yeah. No, the idea that this recruiting class is almost done is absurd. This is going to be the most fun recruiting has ever been. And I say that because I don't feel like Ohio State is at a high risk for those decommitments. Maybe one or two players here and there, but I think that, Ohio State's track record for decommitments maybe isn't Clemson good, but this class, I think, really enjoys being a part of this class. And I don't think that, again, aside from, I think there's one, I'm not even going to say his name, but I think there's maybe like little tiny embers of smoke on one player potentially going to Florida somewhere down the line. And even then, that's it. It's like this one little tiny maybe on this guy. It's not like there's open flirting, and it's not, I guess what I'm trying to say is that this epic wave of decommitments is coming, and I don't think Ohio State's going to be on the negative side of it.
Yeah, there's going to be guys that they're going to be able to, I don't know, is poach the right word? Just get back into it. And the thing is, how many more spots do they have? 5 or something? 5 or 6 maybe?
6, potentially 7.
And
because I imagine they're going to gray shirt the punter, so he wouldn't count against the 25. So,
but you're counting the Washington
class.
And you're counting the Washington kids as in pretty much already. And so like how much room do you have for decommitments? If we're assuming Tywone Malone gets in, defensive tackle, maybe you got room for 3 of those guys that are with other classes. And I know Jordan Hancock, the cornerback at Clemson, is interested in visiting Ohio State, and Clemson has a no visit rule. And if you visit, then you are no longer committed to Clemson, and we'll see. That rule may only apply to low 4-star and 3-star guys.
I don't know. The number one player per the 24/7 Sports composite decommitted from Clemson. So I think the only reason that rule works is because it does, I think, apply to everybody.
And Dabo doesn't want to bring in official visits in the spring as well. And so he's got some interesting rules. I mean, things are working, but I don't know. It's not because of the rules. I think it's because Clemson is a pretty good place to be right now.
Right. Yeah, I vaguely have it at 6 or 7 additional spots in the recruiting class. Again, Ibuka, Tuimolau, you almost count as in, and then they absolutely need 2 additional offensive linemen. A couple weeks ago, maybe also placing Latham and Burton in there, but Latham probably not, and Burton feels like I don't even want to say a coin flip. It feels less than a coin flip at this point. Yeah. It feels almost like Ohio State's slipping to 3rd in the Burton race. So they're going to need, I think, 1 more tackle and 1 more interior offensive lineman. And I don't feel great about any of the interior linemen. Rayshon Benny is still a guy you're looking at from the offensive tackle standpoint. And then, of course, Tristan Leigh. And, if they can maybe get both of those guys, do they just sort of say those 2 are our outside guys? And I know that a part of the recent 24/7 Sports re-rankings, I believe they moved Ben Chrisman to guard. So, does Ben Chrisman, and not that Ohio State has to follow what 24/7 Sports says, but, if Chrisman's a guard, maybe Benny and Lee in an ideal scenario become your outside, your tackles. So if you're saying, who are they looking to get from, this wave of decommitments? I think that they're still trying to put together an offensive line class that is only 2 people, but they want to be 4, potentially 5, if that 5th person's the right person.
And they may still come back around on an Ohio kid.
Yeah.
Down the line. And those are the guys that you can wait until December to go ahead and offer and steal from, West Virginia or Pitt or wherever.
Rankle, and I'm forgetting the kid who's committed to West Virginia right now, but Rankle's at Pitt. Yeah,
and then hopefully there will be a high school season, and you'll be able to see, coaches will be able to see those guys as they develop, which is something that Urban Meyer has been complaining about forever at Ohio State, that things are moving so fast and you can't see seniors in Ohio before they're already committed to somebody else. And with no spring football in Ohio, players develop later, and Ohio State is not getting the shot at the seniors that they'd like. And it is kind of funny to listen to Ohio State's head coach complain about the difficulties in recruiting Ohio, though.
You'd think someone at OSHA would list, not OSHA. OSHA's the safety people. But yeah, the Ohio High School Athletic Association would do something, but if Urban Meyer couldn't get him to change.
Ryan Day is trying to get some semblance of just like a week in the spring of some football activity, and we'll see.
I know that was something Jackson Carman complained about publicly, was that he couldn't camp and do a lot of the stuff that kids from other states could do. And I think, as a part of my grand conspiracy of web that has to do with what went wrong with Jackson Carman, I think in general, he just didn't want to be in the state of Ohio anymore.
I cannot relate. But no, I mean, there's definitely some of that. I think some camps, Ohio kids can't wear helmets. Some just odd things like that. And for who knows what reason. I don't know.
Yep. Also, Christian Leary, who was a guy we were keeping tabs on for a while, went to Bama, which at this point feels more like a loss for Oklahoma than it does for Ohio State. I think Ohio State, as to borrow a phrase Tony just used, sort of laser focused in on Ibuka. They feel good that that's inevitable, and they're just going to go in that direction and be happy with the three guys the two guys they have and the one guy who they feel pretty good about.
I think Leary is more of a slot guy, and they took 2 slot receivers last year or this year with Jackson Smith and Jigba and Mookie Cooper. So they're good there, and I think they would have obviously taken Troy Stellato, who they liked, and then probably maybe would have taken Leary, but I got to feel like they're okay at receiver considering what the 2019 with Garrett Wilson and Jamison Williams. Yeah. Then the 2020 with the 4 guys, and then these 3 guys. They're all top 100 players, and it's pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, one of them's Marvin Harrison's kid, if that for this year's class. And I don't have the numbers in front of me right this second. Jaden Ballard, who's from Massillon, got a huge bump in the ratings.
Yeah, and if you've watched his highlights, and I know you can't judge much on highlights, it's like watching Devin Smith, because it's the same school, it's the same number, and it's the same 10 yards ahead of the defender that he has on the deep ball. So he got a very nice bump. I guess he had a good showing in camps that don't exist.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I got nothing for you on that one. Let's do some questions, and we're running over, so let's go lightning round on the questions. This is a new contributor to the Ask Sloopcast. This is from Dylan Everyday. If a team loses 1 or 2 big games because key players are in quarantine for COVID, will the college football championship playoff take a 2 or 3 loss team?
I think they would take a 2-loss team, because we've seen that they've almost done that already. If you look at Ohio State's schedule, and they were to lose like back-to-back at Michigan State and at Penn State, because Justin Fields is not playing, but then kill everybody else. And I think there'd be plenty of consideration, but it also depends on what everybody else is doing. If there's 5 undefeated teams, that's what's going to be the biggest thing.
All right. This one's from Austin Graham. If Pryor and Henderson were on the 2020 roster, where would they fit in this year's depth chart? Could either crack meaningful carries like Dobbins did his freshman year, will either get actual meaningful carries in 2021.
If you had those 2 guys, then, I mean, what do you get? Like 15 running backs on the roster at that point? And I don't know how anybody gets meaningful carries.
If they had those 2 guys on the roster right now, they don't get Sermon. That they just wouldn't pursue Sermon.
Right. Yeah. They wouldn't need him. Those 2 guys, I think Travion Henderson is a difference maker to me. Evan Pryor is a home run hitter, kind of looks a little bit like Travis Etienne from Clemson, if you watch their highlights. And again, highlights, smighlights. but that's all I can watch.
Right.
I think next year
Banks is
they'll
very
obviously
mad at you right now for talking about highlights.
but I'm interested to see what happens next year. I know some people think Henderson comes right in and starts. I don't. I still think Marcus Crowley, and I'll say it until I'm proven wrong, is the most talented of the running backs on the roster right now. And I may be proven completely wrong, but everything I see from that guy, I like. And I know he was arguably the top player in Florida in 2018, and that's gotta mean something.
You had chat availability on the message board over at the Scoop. I asked you the question, what's like your most controversial take among the other guys at the Scoop? And you said that you didn't think Sermon was, you know what, you say what your opinion is.
I don't, because people were asking, like, what do you think he's going to do this year? And everybody was saying like 1,200 yards, 1,400 yards, something like that. And I still go back to, why didn't he touch the ball against Texas?
Yeah, I agree.
That's
with you.
my biggest thing.
I bring this up because I agree with you. Yeah. I think I've seen and Banks and a lot of the guys over there whose opinion I absolutely respect talk about he's going to be this super special difference making, other world. And I'm with you. Like I think the question with Sermon is, does he get more carries than Teague? I don't know that he does.
Yeah. And really, I see them kind of being equal in terms of carries. What do they do? They get 35% of the carries apiece, and does Marcus Crowley get 25%, and then 5%? I don't know. I don't do math for whomever else. I think it would be a mistake to ignore Crowley, and I feel terrible for Steel Chambers, who was going to tear it up this spring with the way he was preparing. You throw Henderson and Pryor on it all this year, and now it's just too much. It's like like a plate of hash browns at Waffle House with everything on it, and which is great. So it's not like that at all. But next year, I want to see Crowley. I think Teague will still be around, because I don't know that anybody's rushing for 1,000 yards this year. Somebody's going to have to average like 6.5 yards a carry, I think, 7 yards a carry to get it done. So that's up to them at that point.
Wait, and this will be a pass-first offense, so I don't necessarily think it's outside the realm of possibility that we see an uptick in yards per carry, simply because the running game, I think, will be an afterthought this season. And
really, anything under 6 yards per carry for these guys is kind of a disappointment, because the offense is so talented and difficult to defend, and the offensive line, pretty decent.
Yeah, I think the offensive line, despite losing talented players, will be better this year.
I won't disagree. I think everybody loves, as much as everybody loved Jonah Jackson, I think they see Harry Miller as kind of like the next Jonah Jackson, except he'll eventually move to center in 2021.
We really failed on the lightning round portion of that question.
Sorry.
No, that was as much me as it was you. From Suncard 19, pros and cons from going legends and leaders to West and East.
Less jokes?
Yeah. Is that good or is that bad? Is that a pro?
So that's a good point. It depends on who is. Are you the butt or the butter?
I'm always for making fun of the Big Ten personally. I'm not one of these Big Ten pride guys. If the Big Ten sucks, I will say the Big Ten sucks, even if some random Minnesota fan on Twitter wants to be upset with me about it. This one's from Suncard 19 as well. Why did football settle on the 40-yard dash, not a 25 or a 50, 60 meter electronic on an indoor track? Well, first off, America, get your 50, 60 meter out of here. Also, as far as the electronic times, if it's not an electronic time, don't trust it. Like, if it's a if someone's 40-yard dash is hand timed, it might as well be a 3.9, because I don't care what it says.
First, a couple of things. The 40-yard thing comes from Paul Brown in covering punts.
Okay.
That was the distance that you usually had to run to cover that punt. So he wanted the fastest guys doing it.
That's new information for me.
Yeah, so he was the innovator of the 40-yard dash, as well as many other things. Former Ohio State head coach. What What was the other thing? It's very important.
Just generally, like, why the 40 and not a 25?
The electronic thing. I was talking to J.K. Dobbins, high school coach back in the day, and he said, I hand timed him at a 4.30, which will mean like a 4.45, 4.48 electronic. So he even understood as the guy doing it that, it'll be different with the electronic timing.
Yeah, just toss out the hand times. They don't mean anything.
You know what's great? When we get to do the pro day, when Ohio State gets to cover it, you'll see a few of us there with our cell phones trying to do the stopwatch on the phones. I'll have Chase Young with like a 3.98. I'll have Devon Hamilton with a 6.52. It doesn't, you don't know.
Well, and then just like show the times to everyone standing around you and see how drastically different they are.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's what we all like. Well, we're only 2 seconds off of each other. Then you average it. Boom, he ran a 4.8.
There you go. Does it count as an electric time if it's on a cell phone?
I think it does.
Okay,
I think it does.
One of our newest patrons, Duncan, asks us, in the spirit of App State, what single game did the most to change the trajectory of a program for better or worse?
What do you got?
Ohio State ruined the Miami dynasty.
There you go.
I think is one, losing that game was the beginning of the end of Miami's, when I say relevance, I mean national championship relevance.
Yeah,
that's the first thing that pops into my head, other than App State.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. And whenever I'm on Twitter and I see the Hurricanes, I always make mention that Ohio State and Jim Tressel broke them. Another one that I thought of was the 2012 Michigan State game, where that's where the team finally bought into what Urban Meyer was selling, and then they could finally buy in even more, and that's what led them to going undefeated. That was the first one that came to my mind, but the answer is, the 2002, 2003, I guess, Miami game.
I also sort of think that Ohio State's second loss, they had the home and home with USC, and that second loss, I in the back of my head count that as the end of the Tressel era. As far as being like a national contender, I think that's when Tressel was starting to drop off, and because Ohio State didn't belong on the field with USC. And you don't ever want to say that Ohio State doesn't belong, but they didn't belong on the field with USC.
They played scared in 2009 to me, or they were coached scared or whatever. They did not have the same mentality they do against Michigan in that game. 2008, they had no chance with Terrell Pryor and Todd Beckman was getting killed. But that 2009 game at home against Matt Barkley, a freshman. Yeah, that was unacceptable.
Yeah, no, like the first, exactly what you said. The first one, I got, simply because of the transitional nature of where Ohio State was and where USC was. They were sort of peaking. Mm-hmm. The next year, the second one was embarrassing. Let's see, from Sean Brawley. The Big Ten gets to gain 2 teams in each division. Who should they be and why?
My answers here are simple. Notre Dame in the East and Texas in the West. And the thing is, it's they're 2 fake programs. They're soft or whatever, and they're cosmopolitan. And what do they really add? But I think it would just be cool to have them. Yeah. Those are 2 major programs, and I think they would have to step up their games, which would be good for them.
Yeah.
It'd certainly be more difficult than Notre Dame being in the ACC right now.
Yeah, for sure. ACC, we'll see what North Carolina does. They seem to have a lot of momentum, but it's just Clemson and everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
Even more so than the Big Ten is Ohio State and everyone else. Because ACC doesn't have anyone, I would say, to the quality of Penn State or even Michigan, Wisconsin. They don't have a second tier of teams.
So who you got?
Well, I mean, it's hard to beat Notre Dame in Texas. I just don't see Texas happening. Notre Dame, I despite all evidence to the contrary, I still hold out hope for, which is just dumb. I often think about, I feel like Oklahoma, they don't fit for all of the other Big Ten reasons, academically and all of that. I always felt like Pitt would be interesting. They fit right in the footprint. Maybe do a favor to Penn State, who even after being in for nearly 30 years, still sometimes feels like the other team in the Big Ten somehow. But it does help that if you think about just geography, pre-Maryland and Rutgers, how far away Penn State was from everyone else, I don't know if people actually really realize the geography of it. I always thought Pitt, because Pitt checks all of the other boxes as far as being from a major market, being a good academic institution, being a good research institution. They check all those other boxes that the Big Ten legitimately cares about. And I always thought that the Tar Heels would be an interesting add as well.
Yeah, they were on my list back when expansion was big, and I know that would add to the basketball aspect of it as well. And it's not like they're trash in football. I think they're right up there with Maryland, right up there with Rutgers.
Oh, they're above Rutgers. From Suncard, make a change to rivalry weekend. This is the summation of what he says, and then he also throws in a Michigan App State joke in the end. Don't think I didn't see that, Suncard, but just trying to fast forward a bit here. This isn't necessarily rivalry weekend. By the way, he just sort of names a bunch of stuff nationally. But so just to maybe change it to a rivalry game, I would love to see Texas and Oklahoma actually play in each other's stadiums from time to time. Would be a change I would like to see.
Yeah, and I know people love the thing in Jacksonville with Georgia and Florida, but I want campus. Anytime you can give me campus, give me campus.
Yeah, 100%.
I wouldn't mind seeing, the rivalry. How many of the SEC, the Chicken Bleep Saturday games is that the week before rivalry weekend?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I wouldn't, what I would like to see is the SEC and the ACC stop hiding behind their season ending rivalries with each other to, when it comes to not scheduling somebody difficult in a non-conference.
Yeah.
I get it. I don't like it. I get tired of Clemson and South Carolina. I don't care. I'd like to see, at least Clemson will go out and do some other things, but like Georgia hiding behind Georgia Tech or Florida and Florida State, I'd like to see something new.
Yeah, I get that. Let's see. From the Mad Canadian, you get to have dinner with one great Buckeye. Then he says you can have chicken or steak in your beer of choice. What seasoning do you have? You know what, TMC, this is not your place for an ad. Trickster. All right, dinner.
I like the chili salt. That you had mentioned. That sounded
Mad
interesting.
Hatter. It's I got a preview of it. It's dang good.
Yeah.
It's my new favorite chicken tender.
I don't know. What do you got here?
Dinner with a great Buckeye. I'm gonna take a second here and plug Kirk Barton's podcast. Because it kind of felt like I had lunch at least with Orlando Pace, because they were I heard someone complain, oh, I wish Kirk Barton had talked less and let so-and-so talk more. And no, I didn't want an interview. I wanted to be a fly on the wall of two Buckeye legends having a conversation. I loved what Kirk Barton did with that and didn't sit there and just read questions. They had a conversation. That's what I liked. Orlando Pace, I made the joke on Twitter, again, not wanting to get into the politics of anything, but they're going to take down the Christopher Columbus statue in Columbus. And I'm like, well, just put Orlando Pace up there. I'll be happy with that. That to me, and I know because I've heard you talk the same, to me is just the gold standard, especially in my lifetime of Buckeye lore, is just Orlando Pace is the gold standard.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And the thing about that interview with Kirk is talking to his hero.
Yeah.
And so
you can tell. He gets borderline giddy at times.
Imagine yourself talking to your hero. And then, what kind of interview would you be able to do with that? And
yeah,
but it was great because, you could definitely tell that there was just some appreciation that Orlando is on the show with them. And it was a great conversation and fun, funny, and Orlando he's the best. So maybe I think that would be the answer for a lot of people, and Jim Tressel too.
Yeah. All right. Sun Card says you have to do a 45-day weight loss challenge. You only get to drink 1 beer. That's it. Your entire diet is beer. Is the summation of it. Sticking with your high life?
Oh man. Do you have to go with like light beer for the weight loss?
No,
or?
he just says no. The diet is that you can only drink 1 beer for your entire nutritional intake for 45 days.
You might have to go with something with like some more body to it, and
you need like a milk stout or just to live, to try and preserve some muscle mass. I don't recommend.
Is there a protein beer?
There are milk stouts, which I think would probably have more protein than the average beer.
What about a mead?
I mean, that's going to be pure sugar. Well, a mead is just
honey
wine.
Yeah.
That's all it is. So it's just pure sugar.
No.
Yeah. I'm going to pass. I'm just going to pass on the entire idea of the diet. From Sean Brawley. If Tony had an Italian last name, what would it be? I don't know what to do with that one either.
I don't know. I think it's racist.
Yeah, that's racist. We're going to go with that. During the season, whenever I would not know how to pronounce a player from the other team's name, I would just like default it to some ridiculous Italian pronunciation. So that's the joke there. TMC asks, more important, recruiting 5-star athletes who perform well or maintaining a system of 3-star athletes that perform greater? I mean, if greater is better than what, but I think this is the what matters more, coaching or recruiting. And the answer is both. Like you can't, we've seen Texas and USC sign these great classes and do garbage with them.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen programs sign near only 3-star kids and get close to the playoffs. But if you want to make the playoffs and win in the playoffs, you have to recruit 5-star kids, give them a good game plan, and develop them well. That's the bar.
Yeah, that's the easy answer. That's what it is. And we see plenty of people not waste talent, and you see other coaches make the most of it. And the key is making the most of the great talent.
Yeah, not to call out anyone by name, but there are 2 Ohio State media folk who had like months-long argument on Twitter about what's more important, coaching or recruiting. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, it's both. You can't have one or the other. But I just stayed out of it.
I like to stoke the fire every now and again.
Well, one of them in particular is very easy to get those embers going. I'm just going to leave it at that. Mark Givler asks, Breaking Bad or Game of Thrones?
It's Breaking Bad every day. Game of Thrones is great visually, and if you want to really, really invest in a story that is fine and gets, I think, worse as time goes on. Like the last season is not the best, but I think Breaking Bad just gets better and better, and that's my favorite show of all time.
Game of Thrones was more ambitious, and it delivered on that ambition up until the end. While Breaking Bad, I think, always knew exactly what it was and what it wanted to be and executed that vision perfectly. Yep.
They started with they knew where they were ending with the start.
Yeah. All right. This next, I can't pronounce this name, but it's from the board. He asks, is Tom as great in real life as he seems on podcasts?
No, he's terrible.
We'll leave it at that. TMC asks, what does Gerd eat on game day? And I'll answer this one for you. Mm-hmm. It's whatever the press box feeds you.
Yeah. And it'll be hot dogs or hamburgers. This year, it may not be anything. It may just be boxed lunches, because normally it's like a buffet style, and that's going to be out of the picture for a while.
Yeah.
So boxed lunch, ham on a wheat roll type of thing with a bag of Lay's, a cookie, and a banana is usually what we used to get.
Whew, that's rough.
Yeah.
They could get some Chipotle for you.
You know,
it comes in its own little self-contained thing, and Chipotle's never had health issues.
That's actually not quite true. But we City Barbecue used to help us out there at the press box. We used to have a McFlurry machine. But now the budget, forget about it. There's going to be nothing. And you're there for a noon game. I'll get there at 9 and be there until 7. And so you have to grab something on the way home. But last year they did start bringing us food after the game.
That's nice.
Now, granted, it was leftovers from sweets and stuff, but it was untouched leftovers for the most part.
Presumably.
But our favorite places are the places that give you the post game pizza, when you can get back to the press box and they've got pizza waiting for you. That's how it. Those are the people who care about people.
I think I saw this somewhere on the message board. The leftovers are what Gene Smith doesn't. What's left over from
from their suite? I believe that is the rumor, but you know what? Ain't none of us complaining.
No.
You get to the buffalo chicken dip. You got all kinds of sweets, cookies, and
I work in a headquarters for a company in my day job, and there are always, in the past there were board meetings and big things with clients where they're trying to impress, and then everyone's just sitting there watching their email, waiting for leftovers are now in the kitchen. No one's above it. No. Anyone who says they're above it's lying or just snotty, and I don't associate with them anyway.
And the only thing sports writers are above are sports readers. So,
Oh, that is true in some cases, which is why I like you, Tony.
Right. No, and I can make that joke because I do not see myself that way. And, but
those people exist, though, for sure. I could name names. I'm not going to. I know you could, but I'm not going to ask you to either.
Don't make me burn my bridges just yet.
All right, Tony. That's the end of the episode. We're going super over, so just going to go ahead and I think end the show without doing too much plugging. I'll give you an opportunity. What do you have? What do you want to plug?
Check out BuckeyeScoop.com. Check out, you can find me on Twitter at Tony Gerdeman. And really, I don't want to make the show any longer than I already have.
That's fair enough. Do you have a band? You want a band from Ohio? You want me to play real quick? At the end of today's show?
I could go for some Southeast Engine, Ruthie.
Sorry, what?
Ruthie or Old Oak Tree. Those are two good ones.
One of those two. You guys can check the show notes for which one I pick. It'll probably end up being whichever one is shorter. So, with all of that being said, I'd like to ask everyone to drink local beer, support local music. Nope, that said it wrong. Got nervous. I'd like to encourage everyone to drink local beer, listen to local music, and support your local podcasters. Once again, this is Southeast Engine.
Here's a little song about Bob and Mary. They met under an old oak tree, hitched a ride on a river ferry. Dee-dum diddle-um diddle-I-dee. They were out up here in Ohio on the banks of the Hocking, wide-eyed and full of wonder. Dee-dum diddle-um diddle-I-dee. Hey, round that horn in an old oak tree. Hey, old oak tree, be the death of me. Soon enough, now Bob was working, framing homes for the company, nailing up quarters on lumber. Dee-dum diddle-um diddle-I-dee. Mary works hard on the garden, carrots, potatoes, and greens all day long, spring through autumn. Dee-dum diddle-um diddle-I-dee. Hey, round that horn in an old oak tree. Hey, old oak tree, be the death of me. One night the stars were shining with a full moon bright and free. Bob and Mary took to each other, dee-dum, diddle-um, diddle-I-dee. 9 months later, Mary's pushing out, comes the little baby. Within seconds came a second, that surprise second was me. Hey, round that horn in an old oak tree. Hey, old oak tree, be the death of me. Here I am many years later, riding on that same ferry, escaping the land I come from, dee-dum, diddle-um, diddle-I-dee. What's out there beyond the mountains? What's out there beyond the sea? What's out beyond the horizon? Dee-dum, diddle-um, diddle-I-dee. Hey, round that horn in an old oak tree. Hey, old oak tree, be the death of me. Old oak tree, be the death of me. Old oak tree, be the death of me.
I'd like to thank Southeast Engine for ending today's episode. And I'd like to thank Tony Gerdeman again for joining us on today's episode. I'd also like to thank the Mad Canadian Barbecue Company for sponsoring today's episode. Mad Canadian Barbecue Company offers so many amazing spices. You can check out the Mad Canadian BBQ to find out more. He has all of the spices categorized by what you're putting it on. You can go to chicken rubs, beef rubs, pork rubs, rib rubs, vegetable rubs, and also t-shirt section. I'm not sure what spices you put on a t-shirt, but, just ask the Mad Canadian. He'll help you out. This episode of the Sloopcast is also brought to you by Wolf's Ridge Brewing. Wolf's Ridge Brewing is offering so many amazing beers. I already sold Tony on getting a 6-pack of the Heartlandia. I think I sold him on it. I think he's going to pick up a 6-pack of that Heartlandia because like I said, it's a craft beer, but if you're not into craft beers, then I think this is your gateway in. A lot of the Wolf's Ridge stuff is very easy drinking. You can check those IBUs right there on the can. If it's a lower IBU, it's, sometimes people have this lofty idea of what craft beer is or might be. And it's just beer, but better. That's it. It's not all very challenging to drink, and it's not all it's not all high alcohol. All of the stuff's right there on the Wolf's Ridge can. It tells you how much alcohol is in it. It tells you how much IBU is in it, which is like a bitterness unit, might be what the BU stands for. I'm not sure, to be honest with you. And then I tell you right there what the flavor profiles are too. They really are doing a great job taking the mystery out of some of the beer. You can look right at the can and probably find out for yourself it's going to be a thing you're into or not. And all of this info is not just on the cans, but also on the website. So head on over to wolfsridgebrewing.com. Once again, that is wolfsridgebrewing.com.